Audio. All right, here we are live in theory. So let's just get everything started. Hopefully, it still has me auto muted. Yes. Switch everything to live. Where's the chat window? Where's the window over here? Okay, I did something wrong. Docs, chat. There we go. All right, so that's set to live, and let's get the other stuff up. Google Earth, go directly, like I just did, through the URL stuff so that you don't trigger YouTube's automatic use, or sorry, Google's automatic use of its stupid AI thing. And we also need Maxogear. I get myself up on, there we go. Direct to Twitter. Again, not going through the thing, bookmarks. All right, that's all set. Oh, dang, that was fast. What is this plus? This better not still be that same thing from last time. But why? Why won't you get rid of this? Why do you want me to click this so badly? I'm not doing it. Okay. So as always, I'll do some smaller, or maybe not necessarily smaller stuff real quick while we wait for everybody to show up. So on the smaller end of stuff, uh, yeah, I guess we'll stick with black up here. Kurdistan, the Kurdistan region in Iraq. We keep going through this again and again. Supposedly there were successful negotiations about restarting the pipeline through Turkey, but Kurdistan and Iraq and the those governments or the Turkish governments were not uh, have had difficult times agreeing on who gets what share of the money. They supposedly agreed to a deal last month, but then backed out of it. Then they agreed to it again, and then it fell through again. And supposedly, as of the last couple days, they agreed to another one again. But given the pattern so far over the past like year of 8 billion times of this being agreed upon and then disagreed upon at the last second, I have my doubts, but we'll see if that restarts. If that does, that would be like another few 100,000 barrels per day suddenly returning to Iraqi oil production and thus total global oil production as well. It's lagging and it's no longer lagging, it's passing out. Okay. We're back in the clear. And I think, what was the other minor thing I wanted to? Oh, yeah. So there was that big secret, who knows what really for meeting in Quantico, where Hegseth summons all the generals, and everybody was speculating about things that might happen, but it ended up being nothing. It ended up just being Hegseth mostly kind of beating his chest on stage about how like awesome he is and how much of a warrior Giga Chad he supposedly is, and how he's gonna, I don't know, unwoke the military or something, because that's, I don't know, his destiny or whatever. He has a bit of a self-aggrandizement going on. Meanwhile, down here, let's see, over blue water, so we'll go back to yellow. As you remember, we have quite an ensemble of U.S. military assets in the Southern Caribbean and on Puerto Rico and various islands everywhere. which is being increased by the day or by the week. We now, instead of just the one floating semi or small carrier that also has landing vehicles and stuff and thousands of Marines on it. We now have two more that are a lot smaller. They're not really carriers, they're kind of just amphibious assault ships, but each of them also does carry a few Viper attack helicopters as well, along with like spec ops, stealth insert, and extraction helicopters, and more drones and stuff were moved to Puerto Rico for potential use of those. So the buildup is slow, but it is still ongoing. However, the U.S. administration also now has, as of, I don't know if it was this morning or yesterday, put out notice with the gradual manufactured consents, like what is was it preempting, since they already the administration already declared that the Venezuelan government is a cartel organization and has now said that the US is at war with the cartels, which, you can kind of put two and two together with they're going off of implication there. So by extent, they can now uh, do any strikes on Venezuela if they want, like actually in Venezuela, not on random like drug runner boats out in the open. But they can actually, if they decide to start doing so, however soon or however long from now, on legal paper needs, they now have the written out. They now have the written out reasoning, since they did the tie-in of already labeling Caracas as a cartel regime, now declaring that the U.S. is at war with cartels, and thus from that they can then just extend that to saying that Venezuela is effectively waging war on the U.S., which now means they can just go through with all of the intended deep strikes and eventual regime shifting, or just term acquiescence, as you know, maybe there might be some intent to see if he will or try to get Maduro himself to just acquiesce to the assumed terms, but most likely he won't. So probably is going to be actual like change in the end. Uh, all right, everybody should be here now. Oh yeah, yeah. It was. I didn't actually like watch the speech. I just saw pieces of it. I saw enough basically, but I mean, it's coming from a dude who literally has, no matter how many times you try to insist that. I think I'm past the time limit, so I can actually say the word Nazi and it will not get the video flagged. But no matter how many blinders you have on and try to insist the only Nazi symbol in existence is just the swastika. No, the uh, the whole the whole Knights Templar uh, multiple iron crosses around a big iron cross thing, that is pretty predominantly just used by neo Nazis. And the dude has it like massively tattooed on one of his on I think his right pec, and he like posts photos on his Instagram centering and making sure you can pretty clearly see that uh, big Templar buckethead helmet crusader tattoo on his right pec. So that nothing's really being hidden here. Nothing's even like subliminal about it. All right. So to some of the bigger stuff, the stuff we all knew. You remember I mentioned this, or I said at first that what the oh, that's the size, not the color. Switch back to black. Okay. So we have the exchange between Israel and Iran already back in June. Israel decimated quite a number of sites, but not everything. And I said back then that they're not going to leave this unfinished because, I mean, the whole idea is they plus we, plus secretly, although they don't want to admit so, basically every government in Europe as well, want the Iranian regime shifted to a more amicable one. So this was always going to keep going. I did not have a specific idea when. However, in I think it was early August or late July, you may remember I said somebody had, I forget whether it was from our department or from the IDF themselves, had leaked slash maybe with authorization just said that likely things were going to restart in November. And turns out they're probably right. Maybe it won't be November because that's the one they said specifically. And for the sake of surprise, I guess it'll be December or this month. But it was just announced a few days ago that with very ambiguous terms, so I don't know what they, don't know what they mean by this, except you do know what they mean by it because they just mean they're going to do it. They said if conditions do not improve, or sorry, if circumstances do not improve, then the IDF is going to launch a new air campaign against Iran sometime in the next 3 months or before the end of this year, basically. Of which, the leaked November timeline idea is within that, but they might do it a different time because, that time was leaked, or that's the one they may have said intentionally for disinformation purposes. But, uh, you know, a whole public consent thing, casus belli, blah, blah, blah. Reasoning put out is that, conditions are not improving, but no conditions were like listed. It's just really ambiguous. So it's just a statement of we're going to do it. But everyone kind of knew that. Hopefully, at least I would assume that's the fact that this is going to keep going until Tehran is shifted into a more desirable governance position. The idea that this was going to keep going was kind of one of the most obvious things on the face of the earth. One would hope, at least. So that is upcoming. Meanwhile, and we're green here, so you can see the yellow will work best. Actually, hold on. You need to scroll up here. Yaroslavl is this one, right? Yes, yes. I still know my geography. I still got it. So add Yaroslavl to the list on top of all the other ones that have been struck thus far. Refinery after refinery after refinery after refinery after refinery after refinery. Burning, 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 burning. All burning. Everything's burning. So, ironically, I think there's a small one in Kursk that, despite its proximity, is one of the only ones that's been left untouched to this point. But so much has been hit and burnt that we're now at 38% of Russian refinery capacity offline. And they are now, the Russian government has now announced that for the sake of maintaining economic stability and fuel availability, they're going to start importing refined fuel for one of the few times in Russia's history. They're going to have to start relying on refined product imports. Now, they can still get some from Belarus, but not a lot because the exchange pipeline was hit. So they're going to be getting a lot from Kazakhstan in this case. And scroll over here. Out in the east, probably get some from China, as China has about 20 million barrels per day of refining capacity, as they built up capacity continually, expecting that their oil demand was going to continue growing forever. But they're in, the 5-year plus economic debt stall now, despite some commenters seem to think for some reason that like Russia's, half of China's vehicle fleet are all electric vehicles now. That is not the case. They have a high sales number, but that took a huge hit when they stopped the whole subsidy program, though, as has been the case with everyone who stops subsidizing the EVs. But they only got up to between 17 and 18, so they do have spare refinery capacity, but they don't have that much like capacity to ship stuff to Russia because most of the pipelines between Russia and China are kind of only built to be sending stuff one way. So they can use like one of the spare side ones to send stuff back, but it's not really intended for, coming back to Russia. So this is quite the predicament. And now we're getting at the point where the regional governments are starting to limit purchase to only 10 liters per person at fuel stations, which is about 2.5 gallons only. And so people are starting to just constantly switch out their license plates between each fuel station and just get 2.5 at each station and keep switching out fake plates with each other, which is thus, still buying regular amounts of gasoline. That's kind of exacerbating the problem. And also, where is that's the garage door, if you guys hear that. Uh, yep. And the black market stuff has started, and it's not even like an actual black market. It's not even hidden. They're just straight like the people who are buying up stuff like in bulk, uh, you know, which they're not supposed to do, but they're doing it anyways, obviously. And the workers at the fuel stations aren't exactly stopping them. So people are buying like canisters full, and then on Russia's, I forgot what site it is. I don't know if it's Yandex or whatever. That's like the Russian version of Craigslist. They're just openly like with accounts that could easily be linked back to them because they know no one actually cares. They're just openly advertising their secondhand gasoline sales. And while the actual price in Russia on average for gasoline has now hit the equivalent of between $4 and $5 per gallon, the people selling illegal over purchased gasoline are selling it for between $6 and $7 per gallon. But in a number of locations, that's the only way people can actually get a hold of any. And somewhere around here, another oil pipeline pumping station was struck as well 2 or 3 days ago. So the availability to continue actually pumping and moving stuff throughout Russia is also continuing to be disrupted. And as well, this one is Belgrade. Drone strikes on just regular power plants have begun again. after Ukraine did a few of those around the Moscow area a little bit at the start of this year, now might be starting those everywhere for real. Don't know for sure if it was just a Belgorod thing. What the? Don't when I zoom out, don't automatically zoom back in. That's not what I asked you to do. And also, the DoD, US DoD has announced that it's going to start helping Ukraine target stuff, which is not really an announcement because we already were doing that. That's how Ukraine has been able to hit stuff in the past, at least military targets and assets that Russia was moving around constantly. That's how Ukraine has been able to hit stuff. And even if we weren't doing that to begin with and weren't doing it now, uh, the UK and France were already doing that for them, and Japan and South Korea secretly as well, because some people on Twitter forget that the US isn't the only country that has surveillance satellites. In fact, France in particular is really underwritten by a lot of people. France has quite the network on. France has quite the surveillance satellite network on its own, like outside of the shared NATO and EU military satellites. France has like an actual massive network of its own. So the DGSE would be helping Ukraine strike stuff in our absence if we were actually not doing so. But we already were doing so. So the announcement is kind of meaningless, but is being made like for public opinion turning sake. And also for striking the refineries and everything, they don't need help doing that. Those are fixed position things. They're literal giant, massive, like building structures. They're not moving around anywhere. All you have to do with that is literally just input the GPS coordinates, and the whatever you're sending will go to that specific point. Now I said the mouse cursor. Okay, so that's that. And we did the new Iran campaign stuff, and then there's the additional China prep stuff. Do we have anybody else in here? Where? One other person. Uh, whoa, what was that? 12 or 3? Feel like that's probably I feel like that's probably a troll angle, but I'm gonna let you off with it for the moment. So, another prep round going on. We already knew they were prepping and converting large like vehicle arcs, large industrial like vehicle transporting things, ships uh, into prepared use as amphibious transports for there we go for military vehicles and fleets. And now, over the last few weeks, we have been watching them actually do practice runs of loading, of rapidly onloading and offloading huge amounts of vehicles, APCs, IFEs, tanks, and everything else, and practicing getting them on board into secured positions and then off board as fast as they can on top of already seeing them use those weird, massive, like three ships tied together with like a suspension bridge that was also like that there was also like joisted between the three of them with a ramp going to shore thing that they did down on the coast of Hainan earlier this year. So they were doing runs over the last few weeks with these things. But like I said earlier, we're past the point this year where it would be viable to happen this year because uh, it would, again, you'd have to do it in fall because that's when the waters in the Taiwan Strait are the calmest. And we're already like into fall now, and there's been no massive ensemble assembly of force on the coast, which the process of getting everything there and also moving all of your air assets into positions, air bases in the general vicinity from which they could then reach Taiwan. All of that would take, even if you do it as fast as possible, a few weeks. And there's been no actual sign of that. And at this point, we're kind of past the tipping point where it's a bit too late. If they started an ensemble now, it would take a few weeks. It would be towards the end of October, and you'd only really have one more month to go after that of calm-ish, slightly calm waters in the Taiwan Strait. And so you'd be banking on pulling like a knockout punch in that 1 month time span, and also once the waters get rough and the journey starts taking twice as long across the strait, having like no even minor like hidden infantry level resistance left, launching anti-vehicle or anti-ship missiles, like especially from those ice cream truck contraptions. So past the point for it happening this year. So next year, the supposed intel leak year, as publicly Xi Jinping has been saying like do it by 2027, but supposedly there was a leak about the actual intention since they put so much attention on 2027 that the actual intention is to do it 1 year earlier than that for as much of a surprise factor as you can get, even though again there's no such thing as a surprise invasion in the modern age at least. And even in the past it still kind of wasn't really a thing. But supposedly the intel leak was next year. Uh, and since they've been harping on 2027 so much, that might make some sense. But we won't know until we get into like summer or towards the end of summer, as that's when you would want to do the rapid assembly just as you reach the threshold of fall, and then do the actual attempt during fall when you have the calmest waters to cross over. Supposedly there was an aspect of that leak about it being spring of next year, which would I can't draw that confused black guy meme. I'm not an artist, but that would not really make sense because the waters in the Taiwan Strait are kind of the opposite of calm during the spring. So it would be like a 10, 11 hour crossing instead of a 5 or 6 hour crossing, which would mean, 5 or 6 extra hours that all your assets are going to be under anti-ship missile fire. So that one I I really am going to call doubts on. But I don't know. Dub it. They might dub that to be worth it for the sake of surprise. But the extra like casualty ratio they would go for with that, I would assume would make it not worth it. But again, as I once did with Russia before the Ukraine invasion, I'm giving Beijing up there some pretty heavy benefit of the doubt on like strategic decision making. So they could pull a Russia and suddenly act really stupid. But from what I've seen of them up to this point in the modern day, that does not seem to be the case. They do actually seem to be pretty intelligent. So that those preparation drills and runs for those massive civil ferry loading and offloading with military vehicles were those practice runs were observed over the last couple weeks. So they're running through the motions with that already. And as always, I feel like there's something I'm forgetting. I don't want to drag this out too long because Josh has a Digimon stream at 6 that I need to be ready for. Uh, yeah, I feel like there's something going on somewhere that I'm forgetting about. I did the US stuff, the Middle East stuff, Ukraine and Russia, China, Taiwan. There was nothing new with India and Pakistan. The Houthis are still being the Houthis in Yemen. There was nothing specifically new with them. What am I forgetting? Did the Venezuela stuff. Did something big happen in Brazil that I forgot about? Oh, yeah. Resource wise, sorry, I have to clear my throat so much. Resource wise, so on top of Chile's copper production output from their mines constantly going down as they're failing, the new government they elected in 2020 or 2021 has only authorized two or three new mining permits or expansions, extensions of existing permits. Because despite the mining being like a huge backbone of their national funding, they're very anti-mining. So they their output has thus been slipping down from 6 million tons per year down to less than five now, or right around five, or it was right around five. Now it's taken a abrupt drop hit down to somewhere between 4.5 and five, like 4.7 maybe, as there was an earthquake there, not a huge one, or at least not in regards to like killing people and damaging cities, but it was enough of one to do some decent like safety structural damage to one of the larger mines that is still allowed to operate. So that mine has to be closed for at least a few months for all of the slopes and slope stepping or catch benches to be checked and re-strengthened. For everyone who doesn't know, when you see the a giant overhead view of like an open pit mine or a view from like a 45-degree angle, you'll notice that instead of sloping straight down, the the sides of it go like this. Those are called catch benches. So they're meant to, in the event of stuff like sliding down, stuff would obviously get caught and stopped on one bench after another, and eventually it would kind of dissipate the slide. And, they served their purpose in this earthquake. But, after that happening, you then have to go and like correct all of this and reconstruct it back to, you know, structurally functional catch benches. So they have to rework all that for a few months. So that mine's offline. Hello? Hello? We're back. Okay. Oh, look, it's Atlantis. It's another every time anybody sees one of these like weird square looking things, like everybody on the conspiracy theorists seem to have moved to TikTok and Instagram Reels now. But all the conspiracy theorists like come out of the woodworks every time there's like a square anywhere in the ocean and immediately start going off about how it's Atlantis. But also over here in Indonesia, we also have another mine that's gone offline, and this one uh, was due to major flooding that ended up in a massive mudslide that went beyond initial expectations of what was capable, and ended up uh, it ended up flooding and damaging a major mine in Indonesia that's responsible for either 2 or 3% of global copper supply. So that's now offline. So the copper situation is also starting to turn into more of a crunch. Nowhere near as much of a supply deficit as silver is still in. And again, with silver, at one point, global like excess storage inventories, silver being held above ground that wasn't actually being used, was at 2 billion ounces. Now, as the deficit has grown since global silver production peaked while demand has kept growing, the inventories have gone down and down. Now, at the end of this year, expected to be somewhere between uh, 800 million or zero point 0.8 billion and zero point 0.9 billion ounces remaining, so down by 60% since the production peak in 2015. Gold, meanwhile, as I covered in that recent video about gold nearing $4,000 per ounce, gold is not in anywhere near of a supply deficit. It is in a deficit, but remember, global gold production has only plateaued like this, so it hasn't been going down. So the gap between gold supply and gold demand is not like the massive gap that silver supply versus silver demand is in. So gold inventories are being drawn down, but nowhere near as quickly. I think since gold plateaued in 2018, gold inventories have only net total gone down by like 15 or 20% over the last 7 years. And as always, if you want to see like production graphs and stuff like that, you can go to any video and just go down to the description. There's a link here to the access to the drive, and there's all kinds of graphs here from oil stuff, natural gas, electricity, in this case, mining and minerals. And you can go here and see the different production graphs, like global gold production per year has plateaued out around 36 or 3,700 tons. So all that's constantly available for free. There's no paywalls. I'm not tdeconomics.com. I'm not going to do that to anybody. In fact, part of the reason I started the whole free access drive folder was precisely because tdeconomics.com and other sites have started doing that to everybody. Like, for example, here, check out gold prices, nearing 4,000 an ounce. You can still go back 10 years for free. What if you want to see like the whole history or even just 25 years? Paywall. Check out pricing. Questions why they're putting up a paywall, contact us. No paywalls from me. We ain't doing that. uh, Ooh, master thesis. We got an actual like accomplishing person here. Let's see, blah blah blah. Yeah. Hey, they're not the only ones. They're just the ones. TD Economics is just the ones I used the most frequently because they have the most stuff. But it's not just them anymore. Now also CEIC has started doing it, and they were one of the sites that had like some types of data that TD Economics doesn't. Like CEIC had a lot of countries' electricity related data, whereas TD Economics only has like uh, 2 dozen countries, most of whom are not like properly updated. As just one example of CIC having different stuff, and in some cases more stuff. Now CIC has started paywalling, not for like lengths of time, but for specific types and sets of data, seemingly at random. Like they just pick a class or a type of data subset and just randomly say this is behind a paywall now. Uh, world reaction to China-Taiwan war. I mean, that depends who you're talking about. Just in general, investor panic, stuff like gold and silver will like spike massively. A bunch of stock markets will immediately tank because everyone will pull their money, and people will start boycotting stuff. A lot of stuff will be cut off. Like I said, specifically, toy aisles in particular in stores around the world will go desolately empty almost immediately. Stuff stuff made in China will still get shipped out to the world at large, but while the conflict is ongoing, basically all of their southern ports, because of proximity to it, are not going to be shipping anything because nobody's going to be willing to. No shipping company is going to be willing to bring their ships anywhere near that, and that's part of the reason why they're importing so much excess oil right now into their storage inventories. Like I said in that video a few weeks ago, is because they know they're going to be limited on how much oil they can get during that time period, so they're stocking up ahead of time. Similarly, with things going out, it's only really going to be their northern ports that are going to be able to like ship stuff. So things are going to get bottlenecked, although they might also be able to send stuff down overland to then get shipped out from Vietnam, or maybe with the expanded railway projects, they can ship stuff out through Kazakhstan and over to Europe, maybe for things that are like specifically meant to go to Europe. And I mean, that's so there are other routes to get stuff out, but it's still going to be a massive bottleneck. So stuff is still going to be coming out of China, but there's going to be massively constrained in terms of quantity. So there's going to be, months long, half a year plus long, like backlogs or waiting periods on, orders of things that come from China or have some parts in them that came from China. Everybody has been trying, everyone with a brain at least, has been trying to move production elsewhere, but no matter how quickly, it can't all be relocated, at least not that fast, since, like we said, by 2027, although they might, if that leak is true, they might be doing it next year specifically to get, a supposed surprise jump. But everything that went pouring in there over the like 90s and the 2000s can't that quickly all be brought out. But huge chunks of it have been getting moved elsewhere and have been getting moved to Vietnam, Thailand, India, Malaysia, a lot of it even moving over to Mexico. So stuff has been getting moved, but there is still quite a lot that's going to end up being bottlenecked for quite some period of time. And personal opinion wise, how are people going to react to it? I mean, that depends. Are you talking about people with like an IQ of above 5 who know this is coming? We're mostly going to be like, yep, that was coming. And then there's going to be people who are, there are going to be like some idiots who are dumbfoundedly shocked that this invasion is happening, even after everyone said it was going to happen. Every possible indicator of it coming was given. And even after Xi Jinping himself has all but said, yeah, we're going to do it multiple times. And then you're going to get tanky. You're going to get, plenty of tankies. Obviously, we're going to be like, hoorah, go China. This is the most based thing ever. Getting pretty close to 1:30 Alaska time, or in other words, 5:30 East Coast time, where I've been in exile since 2020 happened. So probably going to call it here unless there's a bunch of new stuff suddenly, excuse me, come up when I click on you. Yeah, uh, all in all, this doing this is the big thing, even more so than their population collapse. Although that's going to compound with it, but this is going to be the big thing that's going to, in the long run, cost China their number two economy spot, and is only going to speed up India taking their place. It's not going to be like a flip switch, as in like China does the invasion and their economy immediately like drops to zero or something. But it's going to give them a massive dent that they're never going to come back from, and that's going to allow India to go past them for a time until all of the water crisis situation stuff drags India down, and they have their whole actual like full blown existential war with Pakistan over the Indus River. But that's a subject matter for a different time. So that is probably going to be it then, unless anything else shows up. What was this? Blah blah blah. Well, usually the people the people who would be like China's epic and based. I hope Taiwan falls. Are they're the same people who are rooting for Russia? You wouldn't find that much of a mix. I've seen a few mixers, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. But yeah, with a few very very rare, almost impossible to create exceptions. Like World War II was effectively one of the only real ways you could create an exception. And an invasion is inherently like wrong. You are inherently the bad guy to begin with. And yes, this applies to US Iraq 2003. It doesn't apply to Gulf War 1 because Iraq was the invader in that case. They invaded and attempted to annex Kuwait, and Gulf War One was a push out of Iraq from Kuwait. Gulf War Two or 2003 was an invasion for the sake of regime change. People heavily seem to have listening disabilities and mistake things like me explaining why things happened, like this is why the Pentagon decided to do that. This is the reasoning they had as me saying this was epic and Pepe Frog based or whatever. It wasn't. Neither is neither is the Venezuela stuff. There just like neither was Panama. There were so many easy ways you could have done that. Like with Panama, especially, multiple times, George Bush Sr. was repeatedly. Wait, Panama was the 90s, right? Hold on. I just want to make sure I'm not confusing it with the Grenada invasion. 89. Okay. So George Bush Sr. was told multiple times by the CIA that like we have so many of Noriega was the guy, I think. So many of Noriega's like generals and even the, semi puppet politicians around him in his regime will and can easily kill him for us. If we just pass them a briefcase full of cash, they'll get rid of him and they will reform like whatever government we want them to. There was literally zero need for that invasion. And partially, there is a fair enough chance that if we do indeed want Maduro gone, there's more than enough chance that the CIA could find someone who can and will just like poison him for a briefcase full of money. So the in even though we're not going to do an invasion of Venezuela, it's going to be more of an Iran style thing of a massive like crippling air campaign to eventually just tip the regime out of power. There's still like no real reason for that to begin with. Like the morality of regime change in and of itself aside, the invasions, like Panama and Iraq, there wasn't even any and with the massive air campaign against Venezuela, there wasn't even really a logistical need to do that to begin with. As uh, as we ended up also finding out in Iraq at the time, partly because of how against Saddam everyone had gotten during all the purges and like random genociding stuff during the 90s when he was having his mental crash out post Gulf War. No one really liked him anymore, even people who used to. And we ended up finding out after invading Iraq that, yeah, also we probably could have actually done the briefcase full of money and poison thing. And there's a fair chance it would have worked. So, the part of the lesson here, if you're a military strategic decision maker, and you don't care about the moral basis of anything, and you just are looking from a logistic angle, you need to learn from history where so often when guys wanted another guy gone, you really could just poison the dude by bribing someone, and it typically worked. Or uh, there are rare exceptions, like Castro was a rare exception. Like he banged so many hookers, and so many times we bribed so many hookers. They wanted like their families to be gotten out and given U.S. citizenship. We did that, and we're like, all right, everything's been arranged, and your family will get like $10 million in their bank account. Poison needle, dagger straps like inside your butt cheeks, whatever you want to do, just often. And so many times, by their own admission, when we got back in contact with them, Castro seduced them out of killing him. Like he was apparently so sexually appealing to them that they couldn't bring themselves to do it. So there are really rare exceptions to the just poison a dude thing. Like when someone apparently has so much sex charisma, like Castro did, apparently that's not an option, and no one will get close to them. I guess we never tried it with dudes. Maybe he was so sexually appealing they would have just turned gay right then there on the spot. But yeah, there are some exceptions where it doesn't work. But back on the original basis, yes, the invader is inherently the one who's morally in the wrong, except for really rare, hard to compound together circumstances. All right, we're running overtime. Make more. I mean, strategically, yeah, that would have been better, but uh, they the Pentagon did not, and associated partners did not want to have to deal with the ensuing chaos like we dealt with after removing him in 2003. All right, that will be it then.